Okay, right. So first of all, thank you because I'm very happy to share the results of this project. As you can see, the title is a research about the inspirational power of moral models. And so me and my PhD students started this experiment 1 year ago. So today I will present you the results of the first three experiments. So I want to share with you this picture because it's important to introduce the main concept behind this research. And as you can see, this is one of the most inspiring women probably that we know in history because she's an example of moral beauty and good behavior because she dedicated mainly her life to fight in social injustice and so this we can say that she's a kind of moral saint, of moral hero. But uh, not only there are other important example of this kind of people that do very great things. So basically, these people has the power to inspire many other people to follow their example. Of course, their actions are so important and so huge that we cannot, of course, emulate them, but they have the power to at least increase optimistic and hope about humanity and about people. Um, when we know about these people, so when we witness people doing this type of behavior, we feel this emotion that in psychology is called elevation. And in a while, I will explain better how psychology define this emotion. But here we have another example that, of course, is not so relevant as the one that I showed you before, because in this case, this is an example taken from an Italian newspaper. Here we have, for instance, a child that rescued a dog from risk his own life to save this dog. Or, for instance, example of this homeless person that find a wallet and didn't take the money inside and get the pocket back. These examples are just an idea to let you think about how very often we are surrounded by people doing very beautiful acts in moral terms. And even if they are not moral saints or moral hero as Gandhi or Mother Teresa di Calcutta, they have the power of inspired people to be honest, to be pro-social, to be more moral. And so basically turning back to moral elevation, as I introduced before, also these people has the power to let people feel this particular emotion that is specifically characterized by positive feelings in response to witnessing a virtuous action committed by others. And in psychology, we can we can say that this emotion is not just about feeling, but as an important dimension, a behavioral dimension. So is a kind elevation is a kind of form of inspiration. That means that people also, when feel this emotion, has the tendency to act, to emulate positive behavior. So many research indicate that this powerful feeling, this powerful feeling can promote this desire, so the desire to emulate virtuous behavior. So our idea was born starting from the idea that also some people in environmentalism activism can be a source of inspiration as as the people I showed you before. So in this case, we have one of the most famous, I think, environmentalism activists, that is Greta Thunberg, that can be considered a source of inspiration, especially for young people, but not only. So our idea starts from the premise that unfortunately not always Greta or other people famous for their commitment in environmentalism activism are considered a source of inspiration. Sometimes they produce in people a kind of negative emotion. They are criticized, derogated, sometimes denigrated. So starting from this, we try to understand, first of all, if environmentalism can be considered a moral issue. So if we can compare what happened in moral elevation when people witness act of moral beauty in terms of pro-social behavior mainly, if the same pattern of behavior occur also when people witness act of very positive behavior, but in the dimension of environmentalism. And we consider this possibility because we know from literature that environmentalism is a kind of moral issue. First of all, because we know from other studies that people often feel a moral obligation to act in an environmentally friendly way. So we know that people consider pro-environmental behavior as a moral behavior. But not only for this, also because we know that, for instance, climate change or pollution is not only a problem related to the environment, but it's also a social problem, because many communities are affected more than others. And so fight against climate change is a way also to fight against a social injustice issue. So for all these reasons, we start from the premises that we can consider environmentalist activists as a kind of moral model. Okay. So as I started to say before, not always this type of behavior are considered positive and elicit positive emotion. Sometimes people that act in a very virtuous way can elicit in other people as a form of denigration that Monen and colleagues called do-gooder derogation, that basically is a negative response to people acting in a positive way, in a very ethical way, because these people can threaten our own self-esteem. So here the main problem is the social comparison. So when you are confronted with someone that is behaving better than you, from one side you can feel inspired by that person, but from the other side you can also feel threatened by that person and that behavior, and so not being inspired, but opposite, you can take distance from that behavior. And this is maybe something that can occur when we talk about environmentalism and environmentalist activists. So I'll try to be fast because we have 3 experiments. So I try to be very quick in introduce you the research. But basically, the research aim, so the overall project was intended to investigate the effect of this role model, so the pro-environmental role model, on people attitude and behaviors in terms of pro-environmental. And so from now we had these 3 studies that try to understand how we can use the inspirational power of pro-environmental models without incur in the problem of do-gooder derogation, basically. So our main hypothesis is that negative social comparison, so when people are confronted in a negative way with a role model, can reduce responses of elevation, so positive feelings, and as a consequence can also reduce the intention to act in a pro-environmental way, so can reduce the desire to emulate this model. So the first study we conducted this experiment online. So we use 250 almost participants taken from prolific UK participants. Half of the sample, more than half, were female with a mean age of 44 years. And we have three experimental conditions, basically. The first experimental condition was a positive social comparison. The other was a negative social comparison, and then we have the control condition. So we measured before this condition that I will explain better in a while. We collected some measures, some pre-manipulation measures of demographics, of course. We measured their moral identity, so how much they feel connected to morality as a part of their own identity, their environmental identity, of course, and also the identification with the environmental activists. So how works the manipulation? The manipulation works with a bogus feedback procedure. So what we do mainly, we ask participants to fill a kind of quiz about their pro-environmental behavior. And then we give them a feedback, a bogus feedback, okay? In a positive social comparison, we say them that their own score was higher than the average of the population. So they think to be pretty good in pro-environmental behaviors. In a negative social comparison, we say them that their score was lower. And then in the no social comparison, we just gave them their score and made no comparison with anybody. So the score was the same for all the three conditions. So everyone received the same score, but what changed was the comparison with the average of the people. Then we measure their satisfaction and expectation about that score. And also their self-esteem, the state self-esteem. So we ask them how they feel about themselves after this manipulation. Environmental self-efficacy, so how much they feel to be able to behave in a pro-environmental way, and also a little scale of moral self-efficacy, so how much they feel able to behave in according to their moral standard. After this manipulation, so the manipulation of the social comparison condition, we ask them to read this story about a guy that leave university, so decided to leave university to dedicate in planting trees. So it's a very short paper about this very committed guy who basically decided to sacrifice their own interest in for an environmental cause. Sorry, I have the train that is very close. So I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. After reading this paper, they reply to other measures that are our dependent measure. So we measure moral elevation, negative emotions, perceived threats. So how much they perceived to be threatened by this guy, so to feel bad about their self after read about this guy. The evaluation of these moral exemplars, so we ask them to judge basically this guy, and the intention to engage in pro-environmental behavior, so how much they want to start, for instance, doing some actions to reduce their negative behavior in the pro-environmental dimension. So what we found basically is these are the correlations. So we found what we expected most of the time, not always, but for instance, we found that moral elevation is negatively related to self-esteem. So the more people feel bad about their self and about their behavior, and the less they feel elevated by a model. And also with the pro-environmental intention. So the self-esteem threat reduce their intention to behave in a pro-environmental manner. For what concerns the manipulation, we found that the negative comparison manipulation worked. So they feel, they reported in the negative comparison condition to have lower satisfaction and expectation about their score, but we found no significant difference between the condition for what concern state self-esteem or efficacy, so both moral and environmental. This means that the manipulation worked, but not very well. For what concern the dependent variable, we found basically no important significance difference. We just found that perceived threat was higher in the was lower. Sorry, this is a mistake. Was lower in the control and in the positive comparison condition than in the negative condition. So they feel more threatened by the moral model when they are in a negative comparison condition, but we don't find any other significant difference, at least for except for pro-environmental intention. So here are the results of the analysis of variance. We use identification, the different forms of identification as covariate. And what we can see here, this is the graph, that basically these results suggest that when people are not confronted at all, so when they are in the control condition, they pro-environmental intention are higher than when they are confronted both positive or negative with someone, with the average of the population. So the first study was not very, the results of the first study was not very clear or so much in line with our expectation and hypothesis. So we conducted another study, but in this case, we used the same procedure, basically, but in this case, we use a different feedback in the manipulation. So we reduce the score of the negative social comparison. So we give them a very low score. And in the positive social comparison, we increase the difference between them, their behavior, so their score, and the average. So we try to stress more the difference between their behavior and the average of the population. And then the experiment was the same. So also this experiment was conducted online. We have the same 3 experimental conditions. The manipulation was pretty the same. And so here we found that we have a negative relationship between perceived threat, so how much they feel threatened by the moral model, and the evaluation of this model. So they tend to derogate, to give a negative judgment of this guy who dedicates himself in planting trees. And this was connected with their self-esteem, that in this case was negative, was lower in the negative social comparison condition. So this manipulation worked better than the other study because we stress more the negative comparison mainly. And so we found that in the negative comparison condition, the self-esteem, the state self-esteem was lower, while we don't find any difference in efficacy again. So for what concerns the dependent variable, our hypothesis about moral elevation, negative emotion, and perceived threat or derogation was not confirmed. So also in this study, we don't find any difference in the emotions, but we found some differences in the pro-environmental intention. So as you can see here, we found that the lower level of pro-environmental intention occurred in the negative social comparison condition. So basically, the difference between control and positive comparison is not significant. So are pretty the same, but people tend to reduce their intention to behave in a pro-environmental manner after they are exposed to a negative social comparison. So this is the first result, more in line with our expectation. So we made another experiment, but in this case, we introduced a new variable, a new manipulation, that was the membership. So the social identity of the guy that we use for manipulate the moral model. So what we did here, we used the same procedure for what concerns social comparison, but we introduced the membership of the guy. So we have two other conditions. One is the guy was the same nationality of our participants, so was part of the same group, was an English guy. And in the other condition, we used two different groups. So we say that in one case, some participants see this guy as a Sweden guy, and in another condition, they see an Italian guy. So mainly, some participants believe that this model was part of another group of a different nations. And so we added also a measure of social identification. Why we do this? Because our idea was that social identity can reduce the effect of a negative social comparison, because we know from social identity literature that people who identify in a positive group, in a moral group, derive part of their self-esteem from that belonging. So even if the comparison is negative in the individual term, can be positive if we identified as a group, if we our identity is part of our social identity, is more connected. So the hypothesis is that social identity can buffer the effect of a negative social comparison, and so also reduce the negative effect of this condition. As I said before, the experiments was pretty the same. Here we have, of course, many other participants because we have more experimental condition. And so the paper was the same, but as you can see, we have first an in-group, so the English guy, compared to an Italian guy or a Sweden guy. So here we found, I will go to the effect of manipulation. We found again that the manipulation of social comparison worked. So people feel more threatened in their self-esteem when they are in a negative social comparison. And also here we didn't find any difference in efficacy. For what concerns the dependent variable, we found the only difference in pro-environmental intention, even if the significance is very is a not significant difference, but it's very marginal. So we decided to see how the results how were, because we know that we understand that there are some tendency. So I show you the graph. As you can see, the blue line is the out group, and the red line is the in group. So the three conditions that we have here, control and positive social comparison, are not different between in group and out group. What here is important to note is the tendency to reduce the pro-environmental intention in the negative social comparison when is an outgroup, so when the moral model is from another nation, and to reduce this negative effect of the condition when the person is from the same nationality. So even if the results are not very easy to be interpreted, because as you can see, many hypotheses were not confirmed, so it's not easy to understand to derive a clear conclusion. But we look here that there is this potential power of social identity to buffer the effect of a negative social comparison. So our idea here is that what we understand mainly, but we are making other experiments that we will finish, I hope, in this year, that negative comparison seems to be a real deterrent for pro-environmental intention, but we can derive these results not from manipulation, but mainly from measures. So from correlation, we see that elevation is reduced when people feel threatened by a social comparison, but also that social identity can buffer this effect, even if sometimes can amplify the effect of the envy, we can say, when there is no other threat to one's self-esteem. And this can happen, for instance, when the guy is from the in-group, but people are not in a negative social comparison. So we recognize that there are some important limitation of the study, but we are thinking about if this limitation is a methodological limitation problem that we found in this experiment, or is a theory issue. So if our hypotheses are not based on are theoretically wrong or to be revised. So thank you. I hope to, I don't know if you can follow. I try to be very fast, but I hope it was clear mainly.